One choice. One moment. One love story. Welcome to When He Chose Her. Enjoy the story. The twins are turning blue. Someone screamed across the glass ballroom, and for one terrible second, nobody moved. The music stopped first, then the laughter. Then came the sound of crystal hitting marble as a champagne flute slipped from someone's hand and shattered beside the grand piano. High above Manhattan, on the top deck of the Callahan Horizon yacht, the city lights still glittered like nothing was wrong. But near the center table beneath the silver chandeliers, two little boys were gasping for air. Wesley Callahan froze with a wine glass still in his hand. Noah's tiny fingers clawed at his collar, while Nathan's face lost color by the second. The boys had been laughing less than a minute ago, fighting over a chocolate-covered strawberry from the dessert tray. Now both twins were trembling in their miniature tuxedos, their lips slowly turning blue. "Get the doctor," someone shouted. Chairs scraped violently across the polished floor. Investors backed away. One woman covered her mouth. Another pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Wesley dropped the glass and rushed forward, panic cracking through the billionaire's carefully controlled expression. "Noah. Nathan. Look at me." His voice sounded wrong. Too loud. Too desperate. The onboard physician finally pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside the boys. "Possible allergic reaction," he muttered quickly. "Where's the EpiPen?" But one of the servers nearby whispered the words nobody wanted to hear. "The emergency case is downstairs." The doctor cursed under his breath. Nathan's breathing became shallow. Noah's head tilted weakly against his father's arm. And then, through the chaos, a calm voice cut through the room. "Move." It wasn't loud, but somehow everyone obeyed. Wesley looked up sharply. A waitress in a black uniform stepped forward carrying nothing except a folded white napkin in one hand. Blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Pale green eyes steady. Calm. Too calm for this kind of moment. "Who are you?" the doctor snapped. "Someone who knows they don't have 30 seconds to argue." Her voice never shook. She crouched beside Noah first, fingers gently pressing beneath his jawline. Then she turned to Nathan. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Almond extract," she said quietly. "Dessert tray?" One of the caterers nodded frantically. "The mousse." "Oh my God." The waitress didn't react to the panic around her. She only looked at Wesley. "I need you to trust me." Wesley stared at her like she had lost her mind. But his sons were slipping away in front of him, and this stranger was the only person not panicking. "Do it," he said hoarsely. The waitress moved fast then, one hand carefully supporting Noah's chest while the other made a precise motion near his throat. Not violent. Controlled. Intentional. A strange little gesture nobody understood. For one horrifying second, nothing happened. Then Noah coughed hard. Air rushed back into his lungs with a sharp cry. The room gasped collectively. Again, the waitress said firmly. Wesley shifted Nathan toward her. She repeated the movement carefully, speaking softly to the frightened child the entire time. "Come on, sweetheart. Breathe for me." Nathan's tiny body jerked once before a weak breath finally escaped him. Then another. Color slowly returned to the boy's cheeks. Someone began crying near the back of the ballroom. The doctor exhaled shakily, stunned silent. Wesley remained frozen on the floor beside his sons, staring at the waitress as if the world had tilted sideways. She checked both boys again, brushing loose hair from her face. "They still need the hospital," she said calmly. "But they're okay now." Wesley looked down at Noah clutching his jacket and Nathan leaning weakly against his shoulder. Alive. Breathing. Safe. When he lifted his eyes back toward the waitress, something inside him shifted quietly for the first time in years. Not power. Not control. Something else. Something unfamiliar. The waitress stood slowly, reaching for the tray somebody had abandoned during the chaos. "You should probably fire whoever approved almond extract at a children's event," she said dryly. A few stunned guests actually laughed. Wesley blinked once, still breathless from fear. "Wait." She paused. "What's your name?" The waitress adjusted the cuff of her black sleeve, completely unaware that every person in the ballroom was staring at her now. "Elena Whitmore," she said softly. Then she picked up 2 untouched glasses of sparkling water from the table beside her and added, "And your sons are going to be fine, Mr. Callahan. Kids are tougher than billionaires." For the first time all night, Wesley Callahan almost smiled. The private hospital overlooking Central Park smelled like antiseptic, expensive coffee, and fear that nobody wanted to admit out loud. Wesley Callahan stood beside the window of the pediatric recovery suite with both hands in his pockets, staring down at the rain sliding across the glass 70 floors above Manhattan. Noah and Nathan were finally asleep behind him, curled beneath matching blue blankets, while soft monitors blinked steadily beside their beds. The rhythmic sound should have comforted him. Instead, it only reminded him how close he had come to losing everything in less than 60 seconds. Their oxygen levels are completely stable now, the doctor said carefully from the doorway. Honestly, whoever intervened on the yacht probably saved their lives. Wesley did not answer immediately. His jaw tightened slightly as he continued staring at the city lights below. "Find her," he said quietly. "Sir." Wesley finally turned around. His gray suit jacket hung loosely over his shoulder now, tie gone, sleeves rolled unevenly like a man who had forgotten appearances existed. "Elena Whitmore," he repeated. "I want to know who she is." 3 hours later, his head of security stepped into the hospital lounge carrying a tablet and the confused expression of someone who hated incomplete answers. "This is strange," he admitted. Wesley looked up from his untouched coffee. Meaning she barely exists. He handed over the tablet. 27 years old. Lives in Queens. Works part-time at Solstice Rooftop and occasionally fills shifts at a diner in Brooklyn. No medical license. No criminal record. Community college transcript from 6 years ago. Wesley frowned slightly. That is it. That is literally it. The billionaire leaned back slowly. None of it made sense. The precision in Elena's movements on the yacht had not come from internet tutorials or luck. She had recognized anaphylaxis before the doctor did. She had known exactly how to reposition the boy's airways. And she had done it with the calm confidence of someone who had handled emergencies before. "People do not stay that calm unless they have seen worse," Wesley murmured. The security chief hesitated. "There is one thing." Wesley lifted his eyes. She dropped out of an emergency care program at Johns Hopkins during her final year. Silence settled over the lounge. Somewhere nearby, an elevator chimed softly. Wesley stared at the screen again, but now Elena's blurry employee badge photo looked different somehow. Less like a waitress, more like a mystery. Why would someone walk away from that? He asked quietly. No idea. Wesley closed the tablet slowly. Find out. The next afternoon, sunlight spilled across the marble floors of the Callahan penthouse, while Noah and Nathan sprinted through the living room in sock-covered feet, chasing each other around a 10-foot Christmas tree somebody had forgotten to take down. "Dad," Noah yelled excitedly. "Is she coming?" Wesley glanced up from his laptop. "Who?" Both boys stopped simultaneously and stared at him with matching expressions of disbelief. "Elena," Nathan said dramatically. "The cool one." Wesley exhaled slowly. "She is not the cool one. She is the waitress who saved your lives." Noah grinned. "Exactly." Before Wesley could answer, the penthouse intercom buzzed softly. His assistant's voice followed. "Mr. Callahan, Miss Whitmore is here." For some reason, he stood up too quickly. He hated that his assistant noticed. A few moments later, Elena stepped into the penthouse wearing dark jeans, white sneakers, and a charcoal coat slightly damp from the rain outside. She looked around once at the enormous skyline windows and expensive modern furniture. "Wow," she said calmly. "This place looks like Batman got divorced." Noah burst into laughter so hard he nearly fell over. Even Nathan choked on his juice box. Wesley blinked once, caught completely off guard. "Excuse me." Elena shrugged lightly. "Everything is black, silver, emotionally unavailable. It is impressive, honestly." The twins laughed even harder now. Wesley stared at her for several seconds before something unfamiliar tugged briefly at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Close enough. Elena noticed immediately. "There it is," she said softly. "Your face can do human expressions after all." Wesley actually laughed then. A quiet one, rough around the edges from disuse. The sound surprised everyone in the room, most of all himself. Noah pointed dramatically toward Elena. "Dad never laughs." Elena tilted her head thoughtfully toward Wesley. "That explains the terrifying kitchen. My kitchen is imported from Italy. Your refrigerator has 3 bottles of sparkling water and anxiety." Nathan nearly spit out his drink laughing. Wesley shook his head slowly, still studying her. She moved through the penthouse with easy confidence, completely untouched by the wealth surrounding her. No nervousness, no fake charm, no attempt to impress him. It was strangely refreshing. Elena crouched beside the boys then, checking their breathing almost instinctively. Her expression softened immediately. "How are my favorite troublemakers?" "Dad cried yesterday," Noah whispered loudly. Wesley closed his eyes briefly. Elena looked up sharply. "Did he?" Nathan nodded seriously. "A lot." For the first time in years, Wesley Callahan felt embarrassed in his own home. By Monday morning, every major business channel in Manhattan was talking about Wesley Callahan's newest acquisition. Analysts debated stock projections. Reporters crowded outside Callahan Biotech headquarters. Investors waited nervously for his appearance at the annual healthcare summit downtown. None of them knew the billionaire had spent 20 straight minutes that morning staring at a handwritten note taped to his refrigerator. "Eat actual food. And no, coffee is not breakfast." "Elena." Wesley adjusted his cufflinks slowly inside the elevator mirror and frowned at himself. This was ridiculous. He was a billionaire CEO responsible for a multi-billion-dollar company. He negotiated mergers before sunrise and dismantled competitors before lunch. Yet somehow a waitress had invaded his penthouse, insulted his kitchen, and reorganized his refrigerator in under 48 hours. "Sir," his assistant asked carefully beside him, "you have not moved for 3 floors." Wesley blinked once. "What?" "You have been staring at yogurt." The elevator doors opened. Wesley stepped out immediately without answering. The summit ballroom buzzed with flashing cameras and expensive perfume. CEOs in tailored suits shook hands beneath gold chandeliers, while giant screens displayed Callahan Biotech's newest expansion plans. Wesley normally thrived in rooms like this. Controlled, predictable, efficient. But today his focus kept drifting, specifically toward the paper coffee cup sitting near his briefcase. Elena had handed it to him before leaving the penthouse the night before. "Drink something besides billionaire sadness," she had said casually. He had no idea why he brought the empty cup to work. "Mr. Callahan." Wesley turned sharply as another executive approached him, smiling too widely. "Fantastic summit so far. Everyone is eager for your speech." Wesley nodded politely. "Wonderful. By the way," the executive continued carefully, "the internet seems fascinated with your mystery waitress." Wesley's expression cooled instantly. "Excuse me." "The woman from the yacht. Someone posted footage from the gala. She is all over social media." Wesley's jaw tightened. He immediately pulled out his phone. There she was. Elena kneeling beside Noah under glittering ballroom lights while frightened guests crowded around them. Millions of views already. Comment sections exploding with theories. Angel waitress. Secret doctor. Hidden genius. One clip zoomed in on the exact moment she calmly looked at Wesley and said, "I need you to trust me." He stared at the screen longer than he intended. "Sir," his assistant whispered, 5 minutes until your keynote." Wesley locked the phone immediately. "Remove every unauthorized video from circulation." "Already trying." "Try harder." The ballroom lights dimmed moments later as Wesley stepped onto the main stage. Applause thundered through the massive room. Cameras flashed endlessly. Normally, he commanded attention effortlessly. But halfway through his speech on pediatric innovation, his smartwatch vibrated softly. Unknown number. He ignored it. The watch buzzed again. Then a third time. Wesley finally glanced downward briefly. "Stop glaring at reporters. You look like a divorced eagle." He froze mid-sentence for half a second before recovering smoothly. The audience noticed nothing. His assistant absolutely did. Another message appeared. "Also, your tie is crooked." Wesley subtly adjusted his tie while continuing the presentation. A few investors exchanged confused glances. Then came the final message. "There. Human again." Wesley looked toward the back entrance of the ballroom instinctively. Elena stood near the catering station wearing a black server uniform and carrying a silver tray of sparkling water. Her expression remained perfectly innocent. The tiny smile in her eyes was not. Wesley finished the presentation somehow. He did not remember most of it afterward. An hour later, he found Elena near the service hallway balancing 6 coffee cups like she had done it her entire life. "You infiltrated my summit?" he asked quietly. Elena looked up calmly. "I work here Tuesdays. You texted me during a live keynote. Your face was scaring people." Wesley stared at her. "Do you enjoy making my life difficult?" "Honestly." She handed a coffee to another exhausted employee walking by before looking back at him. "A little." For reasons he could not explain, Wesley felt another laugh threatening to escape. "Dangerous. Very dangerous." Elena noticed immediately. There it is again. What? The almost smile. Wesley shook his head slowly. You are impossible. No, Elena replied softly. You are just very used to people acting terrified around you. The words settled quietly between them. Not cruel, just honest. Wesley glanced around the busy hallway. Staff rushed everywhere carrying trays and paperwork while executives argued loudly nearby about market shares and projections. Yet somehow the loudest thing in the room was Elena calmly sipping iced coffee beside him. You really are not impressed by any of this, are you? He asked finally. Elena followed his gaze toward the ballroom, filled with wealth and flashing cameras. Money impresses people who have never watched someone stop breathing. Silence. Wesley looked at her differently after that. Not as a waitress. Not even as the woman who saved his sons. Something deeper. Someone who had seen pain closely enough that power no longer intimidated her. Then Elena suddenly narrowed her eyes at him. You have not slept. Wesley blinked once. What? Your left eye twitches when you are exhausted. I do not have an eye twitch. You absolutely do. Wesley crossed his arms defensively. I slept fine. Elena studied him for one long second. How many hours? 4. That is not sleep. That is a nap with ambition. Wesley laughed before he could stop himself. Fully this time. Warm. Uncontrolled. Real. Several nearby employees turned in complete shock. One waiter nearly dropped an entire tray of champagne glasses. Elena smiled softly into her coffee cup. Wow, she murmured. The billionaire is house-trained after all. Rain drummed softly against the subway windows as Elena Whitmore sat alone near the back of the nearly empty train, her black work shoes tucked beneath the seat and her coat folded tightly across her lap. Manhattan blurred past outside in streaks of gold and silver light, while exhausted commuters stared silently at their phones. Across from her, a little girl slept against her mother's shoulder, clutching a stuffed rabbit, missing one button eye. Elena smiled faintly at the sight before lowering her gaze toward the paper cup warming her hands. Her phone buzzed once. Unknown number. The twins want to know if you are secretly a ninja. Elena laughed quietly under her breath. Another message arrived immediately. Also, Noah says Batman would definitely lose to you in a fight. Elena shook her head slowly and typed back. Tell Noah Batman owns armor. I own student debt. 3 dots appeared instantly. You had student debt at Johns Hopkins? Her fingers froze above the screen. The train rattled loudly through the tunnel, while her smile faded almost invisibly. She should not have been surprised. Wesley Callahan was a billionaire. Billionaires investigated people the same way normal people. Checked weather apps. Elena stared at the message for several long seconds before locking the phone completely. Across the city, Wesley stood barefoot in his dark penthouse kitchen rereading the conversation while the twins built a pillow fortress around the living room couch. He frowned slightly at the silence after his last text. Did you scare her away? Nathan asked seriously from the floor. Wesley looked up. Why would I scare her away? Noah shrugged. You kind of look like you yell at helicopters. Wesley opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. That is not a real sentence. It feels true, though, Nathan replied thoughtfully. Wesley rubbed his forehead tiredly. Before he could answer, his phone rang softly. His head of security again. Sir, the man said carefully. I found out why Elena left Johns Hopkins. Wesley walked slowly toward the giant windows overlooking Manhattan. And silence lingered briefly on the line. Her younger brother had congenital heart failure. Wesley's expression shifted slightly. She was working 3 jobs while attending school full-time. Apparently, she was paying for treatments insurance would not cover. The city lights outside suddenly looked colder somehow. Did he survive? Another pause. No, sir. Wesley closed his eyes briefly. The answer landed heavily in the quiet kitchen. Behind him, Noah and Nathan were still laughing inside their blanket fortress, completely unaware of how fragile life could become in a single phone call. There is more, the security chief added carefully. After her brother passed away, she withdrew from the program 3 weeks before graduation. Wesley stared silently out at the rain sliding across the glass skyline. 3 weeks. After years of sacrifice. 3 weeks from becoming the thing she had worked for. Why? He asked softly. Nobody knows. The next evening, Elena worked the late shift at a small diner in Brooklyn tucked between a laundromat and an old bookstore with flickering neon lights. The coffee tasted terrible. The booths squeaked loudly. The regular customers complained lovingly about everything. Elena preferred it that way. Table 4 wants more pie, the cook yelled from the kitchen. Table 4 already had 3 slices, Elena called back. Exactly. He is emotionally committed now. A few customers laughed softly nearby. The bell above the diner door jingled suddenly. Elena glanced up automatically, then froze for half a second. Wesley Callahan stepped awkwardly inside wearing dark jeans, a charcoal coat, and the unmistakable expression of a billionaire who had absolutely never entered a Brooklyn diner voluntarily. Every head turned immediately. Wesley ignored all of it and walked toward the counter. "You followed me?" Elena asked calmly. "That sounds illegal when you say it like that." She poured coffee into a mug without asking. "You own helicopters, do not you?" Wesley blinked. "How do you know that?" "You have helicopter energy." For some reason, exhaustion softened his laugh this time instead of sharpening it. Elena slid the coffee toward him. "Careful. It is diner coffee. 1 cup removes paint. 2 cups unlock visions." Wesley wrapped his hands around the warm mug quietly. The diner lights reflected softly across tired shadows beneath his eyes. Elena noticed immediately. "You still are not sleeping. You still are not answering my texts." She wiped down the counter slowly without looking at him. "You investigated me." Wesley did not deny it. Silence stretched between them while rain tapped softly against the windows outside. Finally, Wesley spoke carefully. "You were 3 weeks away from graduating." Elena's hand stopped moving. "I did not ask for sympathy. That is not what this is." She looked at him then. Really looked at him. No cameras. No boardrooms. No billionaire armor. Just a tired man sitting in a cracked leather booth holding terrible coffee like it was keeping him together. Wesley lowered his voice slightly. "Why did you never go back?" The diner suddenly felt quieter somehow. Elena stared down into the dark coffee pot beside her before answering softly. "Because after my brother died, hospitals stopped feeling like places that save people." Wesley said nothing. Elena gave a tiny shrug that somehow looked heavier than grief itself. Sometimes they just become places where people learn how to lose quietly. Neither of them spoke after that. Outside, Brooklyn traffic hissed through rain-covered streets while somewhere near the kitchen an old jukebox played soft jazz nobody was really listening to. Wesley sat there long after his coffee turned cold. The rooftop gala shimmered beneath thousands of suspended golden lights while snow drifted softly across the Manhattan skyline like ash made of diamonds. Wealthy donors moved through the glass terrace in tailored coats and sparkling gowns while a string quartet played near the infinity pool overlooking the city. Cameras flashed constantly. Champagne flowed endlessly. Wesley Callahan hated every second of it. "Smile," his publicist whispered sharply beside him. "People donate more when billionaires look emotionally available." Wesley adjusted his cufflinks without enthusiasm. "That sounds scientifically fake." "Everything tonight is scientifically fake." Before Wesley could answer, 2 small figures slammed into his legs at full speed. "Dad," Noah yelled breathlessly. "Nathan stole my hot chocolate." "I did not steal it," Nathan argued immediately. "I rescued it from abandonment." Wesley pinched the bridge of his nose. "Where is your nanny?" Both twins pointed in opposite directions at once. "Excellent," Wesley muttered. Across the rooftop, Elena balanced a tray of sparkling water while watching the scene with barely concealed amusement. Tonight she was helping temporary catering staff for extra cash, though she already regretted agreeing to work outside in 4-inch snow. Wesley spotted her instantly through the crowd. Somehow he always did now. Elena raised an eyebrow slightly toward the twins wrestling near the dessert station. Wesley sighed. "Please tell me you know how to control tiny humans." Elena walked over calmly. "I worked brunch shifts for 6 years. I have seen things." Noah immediately brightened. "Elena." Nathan grinned mischievously. "Dad has not smiled all day again." Wesley folded his arms defensively. "That is not true." Elena studied him carefully for 1 second. "Your left eye is twitching." "Traitor," Wesley muttered toward his own face. The twins burst into laughter. For the first time that night, warmth briefly softened the billionaire's expression. Then suddenly everything changed. A scream cut sharply through the music. One of the guests pointed frantically toward the far end of the rooftop. "Someone help." Wesley turned instantly. Near the glass edge of the infinity pool, Noah's tiny body had disappeared beneath the dark water. Time stopped. The world narrowed into noise and panic and white snow spinning violently through rooftop lights. Wesley ran. People shouted behind him. Security guards pushed through the crowd too slowly. Nathan started crying somewhere nearby. Without thinking, Wesley dove straight into the freezing water fully clothed. The cold hit like knives. He grabbed Noah quickly and pulled him upward toward the surface. Guests crowded the pool edge in horror while cameras flashed uselessly. Wesley climbed out trembling violently, clutching his unconscious son against his chest. Noah. His voice cracked hard now. Noah, look at me. The little boy did not move. Panic exploded across the rooftop. Someone screamed for an ambulance. Another guest backed away crying. Wesley's hands shook uncontrollably as he tried to remember every CPR lesson he had ever ignored in his life. Move. Elena again. Calm. Immediate. Certain. She dropped to her knees beside Noah while snow melted across her dark coat. Wesley, listen carefully. He looked at her with pure terror. He is not breathing. I know. Her voice stayed steady. You panic later. Compress now. Wesley obeyed instantly. Elena guided his shaking hands carefully into position over Noah's chest. Count with me. 1. His voice broke. 2. Good. Again. Snow swirled across the rooftop while wealthy strangers stood frozen beneath million-dollar chandeliers, completely powerless beside a waitress giving orders like a battlefield medic. Breathe, Noah. Elena whispered softly while checking his airway. Come on, sweetheart. Wesley kept compressing desperately. Water dripped from his soaked suit onto the marble floor beneath them. Again, Elena instructed. Do not stop. Nathan cried against one of the security guards nearby. Please help my brother. Elena looked toward Noah's pale face one more time before gently tilting his chin. Come back to your dad, she whispered quietly. Then suddenly Noah coughed violently. Water spilled from his mouth as air rushed sharply back into his lungs. The entire rooftop gasped at once. Wesley nearly collapsed from relief. Noah started crying weakly while clinging tightly to his father's soaked jacket. Wesley pulled him close immediately, shaking hard now from cold and fear and something dangerously close to breaking apart completely. Elena sat back slowly against the snow-covered marble, breathing heavily for the first time all night. The ambulance sirens echoed faintly below the building now. Guests whispered everywhere around them. Cameras lowered quietly. Nobody cared about the gala anymore. Wesley looked up at Elena with wet hair falling across his forehead and tears he was too exhausted to hide anymore. You saved him again, he said hoarsely. Elena gave a tired little shrug. Kids are slippery. Wesley laughed unexpectedly through the tears. A broken laugh. Human. Real. Elena smiled faintly despite herself. Then Noah looked up weakly from his father's arms and whispered, Dad. Wesley held him tighter immediately. I am here. Noah pointed sleepily toward Elena. Can she come home with us? Silence settled over the rooftop for one soft heartbeat, while snow continued falling quietly around them. And for the first time in years, Wesley Callahan realized there was only one place in the entire city that felt safe anymore whenever everything started falling apart. Wherever Elena Whitmore happened to be standing. By sunrise, the entire internet knew her face. News channels replayed the rooftop footage every 15 minutes. Social media called her everything from miracle waitress to guardian angel in black sneakers. One blurry photograph showed Elena kneeling beside Noah in the snow while Wesley held his son with both hands shaking visibly for the first time in public. Another clip zoomed in on the exact moment Noah started breathing again. Millions of views. Millions of opinions. Elena hated every second of it. You are famous now, the diner cook announced proudly the next morning while flipping pancakes. Elena groaned softly into the coffee machine. I would rather get hit by a city bus. People online are saying you should become a doctor. People online once believed the earth was flat. The bell above the diner door jingled again. 3 college girls rushed inside immediately holding phones. Oh my God, one whispered loudly. That is her. Elena closed her eyes briefly. 10 minutes later, 2 businessmen asked for selfies. A woman cried while thanking her for saving the billionaire's son. Somebody paid for her breakfast anonymously. Another customer requested she bless his toddler, just in case. Elena stared at him in complete silence until he apologized awkwardly and backed away. By noon, reporters had gathered outside the diner windows. Camera flashes lit the glass every few seconds. This is getting creepy, Elena muttered. Her phone buzzed continuously inside her apron pocket. interview requests, podcast invitations, television offers. One hospital in Chicago offered her a six-figure ambassador position for pediatric emergency awareness. Elena deleted everything without opening most of it. Then came the article that changed the mood entirely. The headline spread across every media site by evening. Hero waitress who saved billionaire's son never finished medical school. Another followed minutes later. Internet questions whether Elena Whitmore misrepresented herself. Then came the comments. Fraud. Attention seeker. Fake medic. Lucky waitress. Elena sat silently on the edge of her tiny Queens apartment bed while thousands of strangers debated her worth online like entertainment. Outside her window, snow drifted quietly past old brick buildings while ambulance sirens echoed faintly somewhere downtown. Her phone buzzed again. Wesley. She ignored it. Another message arrived immediately. This is ridiculous. Elena stared at the screen without answering. A third message appeared. You saved my son. Nothing else matters. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Before she could respond, her television suddenly switched to a business news panel discussing her life like stock market analysis. Without a license, she should never have intervened, one guest argued confidently. Actually, another interrupted. If she had waited for official responders, the child may not have survived. That is speculation. So is attacking her for saving a life. Elena muted the television immediately. Too loud. All of it felt too loud now. Across Manhattan, Wesley Callahan stood inside a press conference room surrounded by cameras, executives, and lawyers already advising him to stay silent. The company should distance itself, one board member insisted nervously. The media cycle will pass faster if you do not engage emotionally. Wesley looked at him coldly. Emotionally, public perception matters. Wesley's jaw tightened slowly. A woman saved my son twice. Nobody spoke after that. The press conference began moments later. Cameras exploded with flashes as Wesley stepped toward the podium in a dark charcoal suit. Calm, controlled, untouchable, at least on the surface. Mr. Callahan, one reporter called immediately. What is your response to questions surrounding Elena Whitmore's medical background? Wesley adjusted the microphone slightly. My response. His voice stayed quiet. Dangerous quiet. My response is that while thousands of people online debated credentials from behind keyboards, Elena Whitmore was busy saving children. Silence spread instantly across the room. So you still support her? Another reporter pressed. Wesley looked directly into the cameras now. Wholeheartedly. Even if she never completed medical certification? Wesley's expression hardened. My son is alive because she acted while everyone else hesitated. I could not care less about internet opinions. Reporters shouted more questions immediately. Wesley ignored all of them and stepped away from the podium. Somewhere deep inside him, something had already changed too much to reverse now. An hour later, Elena exited the diner through the back alley hoping to avoid reporters. Snow crunched softly beneath her shoes while freezing wind whipped through the narrow street. Then headlights appeared at the end of the alley. A black SUV rolled slowly toward her before stopping quietly beside the curb. Wesley stepped out alone. No security team. No cameras. Just tired eyes. And snow collecting across his dark coat. Elena folded her arms immediately. You should not be here. Probably not. The media is already obsessed enough. Wesley glanced toward the reporters crowding the front street. Let them be obsessed. Elena shook her head sharply. You do not understand. Then explain it to me. Snow drifted silently between them. Elena looked exhausted suddenly. Smaller somehow beneath the city lights. I spent years trying to disappear, she admitted quietly. And now everybody is looking at me again. Wesley studied her carefully. Not the waitress. Not the hero. Just a woman trying very hard not to break in public. Come with me, he said softly. Elena frowned slightly. Where? Wesley glanced toward the snow-covered skyline. Somewhere quiet. Elena laughed once under her breath. You are a billionaire, Wesley. Quiet does not follow you around naturally. For the first time all day, something warm flickered briefly in his eyes. Maybe, he admitted softly. But you do. Wesley drove without speaking for almost 20 minutes while snow drifted softly across the windshield and old jazz hummed quietly through the car speakers. Manhattan slowly disappeared behind them, replaced by quieter streets lined with sleeping brownstones and dim grocery stores closing for the night. Elena sat beside him, holding a paper cup of diner coffee between both hands while city lights reflected faintly across the window beside her. "You always kidnap emotionally exhausted waitresses after midnight?" she asked softly. Wesley kept his eyes on the road. "Only the judgmental ones." Elena smiled faintly into the coffee. Eventually, the car slowed beside a small brick community center tucked between a church and an elementary school in Queens. One flickering fluorescent light glowed above the entrance. Wesley frowned slightly. "What is this?" Elena unbuckled her seatbelt calmly. "The place I disappeared to." Inside, the building smelled like old books, crayons, and overheated radiators struggling against winter. Folding chairs filled one corner, while colorful drawings covered the walls in crooked rows. Somewhere down the hallway, children laughed loudly. Wesley looked around carefully, confused. "You volunteer here?" Elena shrugged out of her coat. 3 nights a week." Before Wesley could answer, 3 children suddenly ran toward Elena at full speed. "Miss Elena," a little boy shouted while hugging her waist. Another girl held up a badly folded paper airplane proudly. "I made it fly 6 feet this time." Elena crouched immediately beside them, completely different now somehow. Lighter, softer, real. 6 feet? She gasped dramatically. "That is basically aviation." The little girl beamed proudly. Wesley stood near the doorway, silently watching while children crowded around Elena, asking questions all at once. One needed help with homework. Another wanted to show her a missing tooth. A tiny boy wearing a superhero cape made from a bath towel demanded she settle an argument about dinosaurs immediately. Elena handled all of it calmly with the effortless patience of someone who understood chaos without fearing it. Wesley realized something strange then. Nobody here knew who he was. One little girl walked directly past him carrying glitter glue without even looking up. It felt oddly peaceful. "You just going to stand there looking expensive?" Elena called from across the room. Wesley blinked once. "Excuse me. Come help." Before he could object, Elena tossed him a stack of coloring books. "Congratulations. You work for me now." 20 minutes later, Wesley Callahan found himself sitting at a tiny plastic table, helping 2 second graders cut paper snowflakes, while wearing a glitter-covered sticker that read "World's Okayest Human." "This feels illegal," he muttered quietly. Elena nearly choked laughing from across the room. "You should see your face right now." One little boy tugged Wesley's sleeve seriously. "Miss Elena says rich people are not scary if you feed them snacks." Wesley looked toward Elena slowly. "You tell children that?" Elena grinned unapologetically. "It is educational outreach." For the first time in weeks, Wesley forgot to check his phone entirely. Hours passed quietly. No board meetings. No investors. No cameras. Just warm fluorescent lights, paper snowflakes, and Elena moving through the room helping. Children with math homework while laughing softly at terrible knock-knock jokes. Then Wesley noticed something else. She knew every child's name, every allergy, every family situation. One little girl became unusually quiet near snack time, and Elena immediately crouched beside her gently. "Mom working late again?" The girl nodded sadly. Elena handed her an extra juice box without making it feel like charity. Later, a teenage volunteer approached Elena privately holding paperwork. "The Ramirez family still cannot afford the inhaler," he whispered carefully. Elena opened her wallet immediately without hesitation. Wesley watched quietly from across the room as she slipped folded cash into the envelope before returning to help another child tie his shoes. No cameras. No applause. Nobody even noticed except him. Something tightened unexpectedly in Wesley's chest. "You do this every week?" he asked quietly later while helping stack chairs. Elena shrugged lightly. "Somebody should. You barely sleep. You work 2 jobs. Half the city is attacking you online right now. Children still need help anyway." Wesley stared at her silently. People spent their entire lives pretending to be good while hoping someone important noticed. Elena Whitmore did good things when nobody was looking at all. The realization hit him harder than he expected. Outside, snow continued falling softly across Queens while the last few children waved goodbye through fogged-up windows. Elena switched off the community center lights one by one until only the hallway remained glowing behind them. "Thank you for helping tonight," she said softly while locking the front door. Wesley leaned quietly against the railing beside her. "I do not think I helped very much." Elena glanced sideways at him. "One little girl told me you cut paper stars better than her dad." Wesley looked genuinely offended. That child has very low standards. Elena laughed softly. The sound echoed warmly into the snowy street between them. Wesley watched her for one long, quiet second afterward. Wind lifted loose strands of blonde hair across her face, while snowflakes melted against her coat sleeves. Beautiful was not the right word anymore. Beautiful was too small for what she actually was. You know, Wesley said quietly, I have spent my entire life around impressive people. Elena raised an eyebrow slightly. And he looked at her carefully beneath the falling snow. You are the first person who has ever made me feel ashamed of how little I was actually seeing. Elena's expression softened unexpectedly. Neither of them spoke after that. Somewhere far away, a train rumbled softly through the city while snow continued falling around them in complete silence. 3 nights later, Manhattan disappeared beneath the worst snowstorm of the winter. Wind howled between skyscrapers hard enough to shake traffic lights, while thick snow buried sidewalks in white silence. Every news channel warned people to stay indoors. Elena Whitmore was currently stranded under a flickering train station awning holding 2 grocery bags and questioning every life decision that had brought her there. Perfect, she muttered as icy wind nearly stole her scarf. This is exactly how mysterious women in documentaries disappear. The subway delays stretched past 90 minutes. Taxi apps crashed completely. Her phone battery blinked at 3% like a tiny digital threat. Elena pulled her coat tighter while watching snow spiral violently through the empty streets. Then headlights appeared slowly through the storm. A black SUV rolled toward the curb before stopping directly in front of her. Elena stared for one long second before the passenger window lowered. Wesley Callahan leaned across the seat wearing a dark sweater instead of one of his usual expensive suits. Somehow that felt more dangerous. Get in, he said simply. Elena blinked once. Did you put a tracking device on me? What? No. He paused. That would be insane. You answered too quickly. Despite herself, Elena climbed inside anyway, shivering hard as warm air filled the car. How did you even find me? She asked. Wesley adjusted the heater slightly. Noah mentioned your train line yesterday. Elena stared at him suspiciously. You memorized my public transportation habits? Wesley looked mildly offended. I am trying to save you from hypothermia. Do not make this weird. Elena smiled faintly into her scarf. The roads became nearly impossible 20 minutes later. Snow buried entire intersections while abandoned cars lined the streets beneath flashing hazard lights. Eventually, Wesley slowed near a tiny corner cafe glowing warmly against the storm. Closed signs hung in the windows, but soft light still flickered inside. I know the owner, Wesley explained quietly. She lets me hide here when the city becomes unbearable. Elena raised an eyebrow. You hide in tiny cafes. Do not ruin my reputation. Inside, the cafe smelled like cinnamon, coffee beans, and old jazz records. The elderly owner greeted Wesley warmly before disappearing upstairs, leaving them alone beneath hanging yellow lights while snow battered the windows outside. Elena wrapped both hands around a steaming mug of hot chocolate while Wesley sat across from her unusually quiet tonight. No phones, no meetings, no billionaire armor. Just silence and snowfall. You know, Elena said softly after a while. For someone worth several $billion, you are surprisingly bad at relaxing. Wesley stared down into his coffee. I do not really remember how. The honesty in his voice surprised both of them. Snow drifted heavily outside, while soft piano music played somewhere near the counter. Elena studied him carefully beneath the warm cafe lights. What happened to you? She asked quietly. Wesley let out a slow breath. My wife died 6 years ago. Elena's expression softened instantly. Wesley looked toward the snowy windows instead of at her. Car accident. The twins were only a few months old. Silence settled gently between them. Not uncomfortable, just sad. Everyone kept telling me to stay strong. Wesley continued quietly. So I did. He gave a humorless little laugh afterward. Turns out if you pretend not to fall apart long enough, eventually you forget how to be anything else. Elena watched him carefully. No cameras would ever see this version of Wesley Callahan. The exhausted father. The grieving husband. The man who still looked terrified every time his children stopped answering for more than 10 seconds. You know what I think? She asked softly. Wesley glanced up slowly. I think you built an entire empire because controlling companies felt easier than surviving grief. Wesley stared at her in complete silence. Outside, snow hammered against the glass while passing headlights blurred softly through the storm. Finally, he laughed once under his breath. Small, broken, real. That sounds painfully accurate. Elena smiled faintly. I am annoyingly perceptive. Wesley studied her for one long, quiet second afterward. And what about you? He asked softly. What happened after your brother died? Elena looked down into the steam rising from her mug. I stopped planning for the future. Her voice remained calm, but her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. Everything felt temporary after that. Wesley understood the feeling immediately. He leaned back slowly in the booth while jazz music crackled softly through old speakers above them. The twins adore you, he admitted quietly. Elena laughed softly. They mostly enjoy insulting your personality. That too. Silence again. Warm this time. Safe somehow. Then Wesley spoke before he could stop himself. I adore you too. The words hung quietly between them beneath golden cafe lights and falling snow. Elena froze completely. Wesley looked almost surprised at himself now, like the truth had escaped before he could lock it away again. Elena's heartbeat stumbled unexpectedly. Outside, the storm raged louder against the windows while the tiny cafe suddenly felt very small, very warm, very dangerous. Wesley, she whispered softly. He shook his head once. Do not worry. I am not asking for anything. His gray eyes held her steadily now. Honest. Vulnerable. I just needed you to know. Elena stared at him for one long breath before speaking quietly. You do not need someone to save you anymore, Wesley. He smiled sadly. No, Elena's voice softened almost into a whisper. You just need someone who stays. Something inside Wesley broke open gently after that. Not painfully, like ice finally cracking at the end of winter. Slowly, carefully, he reached across the table. Elena met him halfway, their fingers intertwined softly beneath the warm cafe lights while snow continued falling endlessly outside the windows of the sleeping city. Then Wesley leaned forward just enough for Elena to feel his breath tremble slightly before their lips met in one quiet kiss that felt less like falling in love and more like finally coming home. 1 year later, the first snowfall of December drifted softly across Manhattan while hundreds of warm golden lights illuminated the new Callahan Children's Emergency Foundation downtown. Reporters crowded outside the glass entrance beside giant banners displaying smiling children and the words free emergency response training for every family. Inside, laughter echoed beneath crystal chandeliers while volunteers handed out hot chocolate and paper cups covered with tiny snowflakes. Elena Whitmore stood near the backstage hallway adjusting the sleeve of her navy dress for the third time. You are nervous, Wesley said quietly behind her. Elena turned instantly. He looked unfairly calm in a dark tailored suit with one hand in his pocket and that same impossible steadiness she had once mistaken for arrogance. Now she knew better. I am not nervous, she lied smoothly. Wesley glanced toward her trembling fingers. Your left hand twitches when you are anxious. Elena narrowed her eyes immediately. You have been studying me. You started it. A smile escaped her before she could stop it. 1 year had changed him in ways even the business magazines noticed now. Wesley laughed more. Slept occasionally. Took weekends off for his sons. One article actually called him unexpectedly human, which Noah had framed dramatically in the penthouse hallway. Dad, Noah announced suddenly while appearing beside them in a miniature black tuxedo. Nathan ate 3 cupcakes, and now he thinks he can speak Italian. I absolutely can, Nathan argued while running over. Buongiorno. Elena laughed immediately. That is not Italian, sweetheart. Nathan looked deeply offended. Then why did it sound expensive? Wesley rubbed his forehead while smiling despite himself. The twins wrapped themselves around Elena instantly like they had belonged there forever, which, somehow they did now. Across the ballroom, guests slowly began taking their seats for the foundation's opening ceremony. Nurses, teachers, families, first responders, children from the Queens Community Center wearing handmade paper snowflakes as necklaces. Elena spotted several of them waving excitedly from the second row. You changed all of this, she whispered softly toward Wesley. He shook his head immediately. No, you did. Before Elena could answer, the event coordinator hurried over nervously. Mr. Callahan, we are ready for your speech. Wesley nodded once before looking back at Elena carefully. Come stand with me. Elena blinked. Absolutely not. Elena. Wesley, There are cameras out there. Yes. And rich people. Unfortunately. She crossed her arms stubbornly. I am still a waitress from Queens. Wesley stepped closer then, lowering his voice softly enough that only she could hear it. You are the bravest person I know. Elena looked away immediately because her eyes suddenly burned a little. 5 minutes later, applause thundered through the ballroom as Wesley stepped onto the stage beneath warm golden lights. Elena stood reluctantly beside him while the twins waved enthusiastically at literally everyone in sight. Wesley adjusted the microphone quietly. 1 year ago, he began calmly. My sons almost died twice within the span of several weeks. The room fell silent. Wesley glanced toward Noah and Nathan before continuing. And both times, the person who saved them was not a billionaire, not a politician, not a famous surgeon. His eyes shifted slowly toward Elena beside him. It was a waitress who refused to panic when everyone else did. Elena looked down immediately, embarrassed by the applause already beginning around the room. Wesley smiled faintly before continuing. This foundation exists because Elena Whitmore reminded me that saving lives should never depend on wealth, status, or luck. Cameras flashed softly across the ballroom, while Wesley's voice lowered slightly. She taught me that real strength is usually quiet. Elena swallowed hard beside him. Then Wesley reached slowly into his suit pocket. Elena frowned instantly. Oh no. Noah gasped dramatically from the front. Row. It is happening. Nathan nearly vibrated with excitement. Dad practiced this in the mirror. The entire ballroom laughed softly while Wesley shook his head toward his sons. Then he looked back at Elena with a tenderness so honest it stole every remaining breath from the room. A year ago, he said quietly, you walked into my life carrying a coffee tray and absolutely no patience for me whatsoever. Elena smiled through sudden tears. Wesley stepped closer carefully. You saved my children. You saved me too. Silence settled gently beneath the warm lights. Not empty silence. The kind that means everyone suddenly understands something important at the same time. Wesley lowered himself onto one knee. The entire ballroom gasped softly. Elena immediately covered her face with one hand. Wesley, she whispered breathlessly. He smiled up at her with nervousness she had never seen from him before. I spent years believing love made people weak, he admitted quietly. Then you walked into my life and taught me that staying matters more than surviving alone. Snow drifted softly outside the massive glass windows while Noah and Nathan grinned, so hard it looked physically painful. Wesley opened the small velvet box carefully. Elena Whitmore, he said softly, will you marry me and continue insulting my kitchen for the rest of our lives? Elena laughed through tears immediately. Real tears this time. Happy ones. The kind that arrive quietly after grief finally loosens its grip. Only if you stop organizing your refrigerator like a serial killer, she whispered back. Wesley smiled fully then. Warm. Open. Completely human now. Deal. The ballroom erupted into applause as Elena pulled him to his feet and kissed him softly beneath falling snow and golden lights, while somewhere nearby Noah shouted proudly, I told you Batman would lose to her. And for the first time in many years, Wesley Callahan looked around at the people he loved most in the world and realized peace had never arrived in boardrooms or billion-dollar deals. It had arrived quietly beside him carrying coffee cups, tired eyes, and the kind of heart that stayed. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to like, share this video, and let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to When He Chose Her channel for more emotional billionaire stories, unexpected love, and unforgettable cinematic moments. Your support helps us continue creating powerful stories about kindness, healing, and the quiet people who change lives forever. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next emotional journey.